Awesome. So, welcome everyone. I know people will continue to come on, and the session will be recorded. And we're kicking off the entrepreneurship section as a whole with design thinking with none other than Dwayne Edwards. We're honored to have you here, Dwayne. Dwayne is the Vice President of Design for Navigator Platform, where he helps his team build iconic experiences for Navigator customers. Prior to Capital One, he was the executive director at IDEO, with responsibilities ranging from managing an innovation lab for Ford to IDEO North America operations. And I'm a big fan of IDEO. He previously worked as product manager at Volvo Cars of North America, where he helped develop Volvo's subscription model and built stronger relationships between retailers and customers. So, and his leadership foundation was built in the United States Marine Corps. So we have one of our ours, one of our own, serving us today with the design thinking portion.
Yeah,
I know, I love it.
that's right, Sean.
Dwayne received his bachelor's in philosophy, politics, and law from, wow, that's impressive, uh, Bergenton University, and a master's in criminal law and procedure from John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and an MBA from the Yale School of Management. So he's a student of life and leadership and loves to learn from his experiences in history. Currently lives in Frisco, Texas, for any Texans in the room, um, with his three wives. With his one wife and three kids, three sons to be exact.
Listen, let the record reflect that
Oh,
I have
sure.
the
You got me on that.
mention of three
I
wives.
corrected myself. Please tell her I never said that, okay? Um, Joanne, I'm going to leave the stage so you can get going with the presentation. But before I do leave, I want to let the crowd know that this is a unique opportunity for Q&A. So we'll have a solid portion for questions, and no question is a stupid or dumb one. So please use the Q&A button all the way to the right. Write your questions there, and we'll get to them towards the end. And with that, I leave you to it, Elaine.
Amazing. Thanks, Ikram. I'll just start and say how much of a pleasure it is to be here. I don't get a chance to be around, our community as much, and our community being the veteran community, I think is a, special shared hardship and understanding and the shared, all the pleasure and joys of service that we have. That it's hard to understand unless you've kind of walk that walk. So thrilled to be here, thrilled to share. And I think someone made a funny "Go Army, hide the crayons" note. So Rob, I see you. Clearly, you're a comedian, and I appreciate it. Before we hop too much into today's conversation, I'd love to kind of share a bit more about who I am and what makes me tick. So I'm gonna share my screen for a moment here to kind of give you all here to help. Indeed, my friend. Here we go. Share screen. All right, so put us in slideshow. The last few years have been very interesting. Here we go. The last few years have been very interesting for us. We've been on quite a bit of a tour. You see, you have my wife in the back, my one wife in the back, along with my three sons. And so my oldest is Bo, my who's in the back there smiling. My 4-year-old is Caden, and then I have a almost 2-year-old now. And so, the last few years have brought us from New York to Michigan to Illinois and now to Texas. And so I share that because, through all the sacrifices, we've also learned a lot as a family, as I'm sure you all have over the last few years has been interesting for everyone. And so we've spent a lot of times, on planes with these three little guys, Bo, Caden, Wesley. I started my career really when I graduated undergrad in Binghamton. Um, uh, I got a pre-law degree, philosophy, politics, and law, mainly because my parents did real estate and they thought that, their version of real estate attorneys was, they just show up to the closing, get paid a lot, don't do a lot. Now, I'm not saying that's what exactly happens, but that was the premise for why I should explore that. Found myself being really unfulfilled. And I remembered a dream I had at the time, which was to join the Marine Corps. And I thought to myself, if I didn't join the Marine Corps, if I was 70 reflecting back on life, would I regret it? And the answer to that question was yes, I would regret it. And so I said, I don't care what's happening in my life right now. What needs to happen is I need to go figure that out and go do that. So I went to OCS in January of 2007. Uh, Spent time as an infantry officer. I was in ground intel, so that means you spend time in the infantry. Then did some ground work and some staff intelligence work in the DC Capital Region area. And so, through that journey, it really gave me really a deep appreciation for a few things. One, there's nothing that ever replaces the on the ground understanding of for us back then, the battlefield. For in corporate talk, the actual experience of the product, the understanding, appreciation of the experience with the customer. And so being really close to that and having a real understanding of what that actually is, not the theory of what you think it is, but like actually observing it is really critical. And then, moving from, being closer to the ground, being further away, like the DC roles that I played, being able to leverage that empathy to inform more strategic choices is actually just as critical, right? And so you think about more strategic roles and whatnot where you're further away, being able to bridge that gap is continuously a challenge that leaders have, marketers have, or anyone that's creating a product. There's always a gap between when the internal organization and actually when you're needing to satisfy that actual customer. And so those were two. And then the last one, I think that the last principle or value that I've taken from my time in the Marine Corps was around just the understanding and the importance of training education and how that allows you to get really outsized results, right? I think regardless of which branch you're in or we're in, there's just a recognition that you take normal citizens and whatnot, and you put them through a process, and they come out, sailor, airman, marine, etc. And then now they're part of that culture, right? And they're doing things they're appropriately within that culture, and they're moving towards that mission. So a big part of that is there's a selection process and also the process that you go through to become a part of that organization. Then there's maintenance of that. So just a recognition of training education, how critical that is. And so one of the big pieces I'm going to share today as well is around just experiences like Ikram shared. I'm a huge believer of observation and recognizing the power of just paying attention to little things. Here we went to I think Rob mentioned crayons earlier. We actually went to the Crayola experience. And if you haven't been to Crayola experience, I highly recommend it. It's actually rather interesting because they take what one would normally perceive or one could perceive as being somewhat mundane, the act of creating a crayon, and they actually bring you into that experience. The matter that's molded, how it's adjusted, the paper, putting the paper on, the history of it, and they built out a really immersive and really neat way to take an asset that they have, which is their asset of building these crayons, and made that into a whole experience. And so, it's just interesting when you think about the different things that you can leverage in life, right? And so, I see a question here. How familiar are some of you with design thinking? Okay, thanks, Ikram. You're asking questions to folks. And so when I go into, we're going to talk about three things today, right? And mainly we're going to talk about the overarching topic is design thinking. But we're going to start with, what design thinking isn't, because I think there's a lot of hoopla and stuff that's around design thinking that, I found to be a barrier as I've kind of worked myself up to where I'm at right now. And then I'm going to go into a bit more what design really is, what design thinking is. And then I'm going to spend some time thinking about the future of design and how I believe that we as a community are uniquely placed to support that future, and provide some strength and leadership to design. And so, and I'm not trying to sell you all on design, but I'm assuming that if you're here, there's some level of interest. And if there's some level of interest, then maybe I can give you more information to help you make some choices about whatever next steps that might be for you. And so, as we think about, what design thinking isn't, I'll say, uh, I've observed and I've been around quite a few designers in my time, and I can tell you that design thinking has nothing to do with how you talk. It has nothing to do with the type of choices you make in terms of your attire. It has nothing to do with the schools that you've been to, right? And I share that because they're, more often than not, these things can come up as barriers for folks like myself when I was exploring, trying to figure out, hey, is that a space that I can play in? I don't look like those people. I don't maybe talk like those people. I don't, and I certainly haven't been to design school. So what is is there something for me? And I say, quite frankly, yes, I think as you look at the numbers, we've seen a need strategically for design to become more accessible to many folks, including underserved and certainly I would say our veteran community. You do have some folks that are involved in the community, so I won't kind of minimize their roles, but there's certainly a role I think for us to play within that. As a UX designer, design thinking is a critical part of every project. Exactly right, Josh. I agree 100%. You really can't. You're really not, designing an experience if you don't understand the actual customer need that you're highlighting. You don't have true insights, and you may not be solving the right problem. And so I was thrilled to hear that design thinking is a critical part of every project you play. And so that's a little bit of what design thinking is not, right. And I think it's important for us to kind of just like set the playing field and level set on that, because it's really if you think about what design thinking is, it's really all about having a flexible mindset that allows you to navigate tensions, right? And so it may be, you need to figure out how to navigate this tension of business and society that maybe they seem to be at odds, but there's having that flexible mindset allows you to be more creative, more generative, and more exploratory to find solutions. Maybe you're trying to navigate this tension of creativity and rigor, right, or creativity analysis that has, for some, perceived to be at odds, right? You must crunch numbers, do spreadsheets, etc. Valid, and there is a way to be generative, creative, exploratory within that work, so that you find something that is more a strategic driver of differentiation beyond strictly analysis. And so, design thinking enables you to really prioritize the right problem, right? Ensure you're having the right frame and how you're exploring it, and then it gives you a really neat, lightweight, iterative uh, process to iterate, build prototypes, to test them, right? To validate, to confirm your thinking, and to go through that process. And so that's what design thinking is. And for me, they're really core. There are a few core elements to that. The first one being problem framing, which I kind of mentioned a bit before, and that is how you frame the problem directly impacts the solutions accessible to you. I think we've all heard the phrase, a hammer for a hammer, everything's a nail, right? And what that means is that if you're framing everything like you have to use your hammer, then you're gonna approach it the same way. You're gonna pound it in. You're gonna pound it in each time. But if you are able to step back and question how you're viewing the problem, question whether you're looking at it from the right perspective or right angle, then that gives you a different frame, a different way to view, and then that opens up more alternatives for solutions. It's the next element is being, centered on the real human experience, real observation, getting out of your walls, right? So you might be, whether you're at a startup or you're working in a large organization, and you're thinking about, satisfying a need, or you're thinking there's a need, or you want to create a real product, a new product. It's really important to move from, theory, what you have in your head, what you may have sketched out on paper, or what you think the problem is, actually getting out there, right? With reference my earlier example of when I was, on the boots on the ground, really getting out there to experiencing, observing your customer, experiencing the product, experiencing the challenge, experiencing the problem space that you want to design for your product for, because you want to anchor in on that. So much of what you hear in whether it be in corporate or even in your own mind, there could be bias in terms of how you're thinking about what you're hoping to deliver. And if you're in a large organization, it's like playing the telephone game, in terms of the more people that are passing a message, the more likely messages get altered and adjusted, and then by the time you're at the end, you're hearing something completely different than what was actually said. And so, uh, yeah, so we're here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come back there for a minute. Um, the next item we're going to talk about of elements is being generative. And Rich, I don't have that many slides. I wanted this to be more of a light discussion. I have a few slides, maybe 7 or 8 slides, so this won't be very rich on the slide size. But we'll have a few frameworks to share and things of that nature to answer your question. Be generative, creative. Need to complement analysis with creativity. I think I mentioned this before, but the reality is that there's a very unique space that we play as human beings in terms of our ability to come up with ideas, many ways of understanding, or many ways of exploring a challenge. Being in one of the core elements of design thinking is to allow yourself to embrace a high quantity of ideas, embrace the bad ideas, embrace the, or defer judgment in terms of bad or good. But you want to get the ideas out, right? Because the more ideas you get out, the greater the possibility of you to actually move from something that's more incremental to more strategic, in terms of your thinking. And so to do that, you have to defer judgment. You have to be very open. You have to create conditions so that ideas can come from all angles. And that's really important. Sketching and prototyping, making things tangible, being able and willing to not just have an idea in your head, but to sketch something on a post-it, or to create a prototype on with cardboard boxes, whatever the case might be, to show, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And being able to engage in that conversation. You'll find that by building prototypes, you're able to just get better feedback, right? And people are more willing to engage, and they're more able to understand, oh, that's what you meant. Actually, this is if you adjust this here, this is how this will work for me. I think storytelling is another core element of design thinking. Being able to weave a story together in a way that really captures your audience, captures the emotions of what is being shared, and leaves a lasting impression of the message. Storytelling is such a critical component, because when you're able to tell a story well, you're able to oftentimes move the recipient. You're able to make the future visible to them, and if in a way that is challenging to see if it's just a spreadsheet or just a bunch of but a bunch of words in a Word document. And so, if your goal is to actually create change and create impact, then storytelling is a really amazing tool to do that. And coupled with the fact that our brains have been wired for storytelling for the beginning of time, Like, in fact, before we had books, stories were the ways that we passed out information for generations. And the last thing, the last core element I would say is outcomes focused. Um, you know, being, and this is something I think we're uniquely equipped for as veterans, being very focused, less on, making the design look perfect, but making it very focused on, hey, we're here to create this type of function for the user. We are here to make this extremely intuitive and easy to understand for the user. And those are the outcomes that we're driving towards. And so having that is actually super, super important. Um, and then towards that side, I'm going to share a quick story about design and these core elements, and how I first started to even understand these areas. When I was first in I was working at I had a product role for this wealth management consulting firm, and I uh, you know had a product, and it turns out the organization, they invested a lot in terms of what they built out. But when they invested, they built, but there is some good distance between their understanding of what the actual core users' needs were, and the actual users' core needs. And so I realized that in my product role, and I thought, okay, I'm being asked to build these things. I'm not getting a chance to communicate directly with these users. I feel like I'm flying blind. I need to find a way to fill this gap. And so I was fortunate enough to find a mentor at the time, a man by the way of, Jack Kane, who has unfortunately since passed away. But he was critical in terms of helping me to understand the relationship between product and design, and giving me room to explore, understand, really dive deep into design thinking. And so that was a big part of why I then even started exploring design more deeply and took on a design role afterwards. I realized that being able to really get close to my customer, really observe what was happening, would have been critical for the product we were building for that wealth management firm. And then I realized, unfortunately, that there was some good distance there, which usually does not work out well for the organization and for the product you're building. And so, that's a real life story for us, for me during that time. It turns out that that product wound up failing because of the distance between what was built and the actual end user. And so that was, a great learning for me in terms of, in building intuition, and also, experience of understanding, hey, these are the circumstances you need to have product success moving forward. And so that just, I hope to kind of shed some light into why it's important to have design thinking, or design, product placed together. I'm going to share some frameworks from a book, The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. If you're new to design, or really if you're been in design for a long time, I highly encourage you, if you have not read this book, if you're thinking about like exploring or learning more about design, this is one of those really critical foundational pieces in design. Been around for a long time. In fact, this is a new edition, has been released within the last, I think, 5 to 10 years or so. But I highly recommend it. Yes, Josh, 100%. It's a great book. And so two of the frameworks I'm going to share here, is one is the design double diamond, and the other will be the iterative cycle of design, just to kind of make this more real and tangible. Don't make me think this is a all right, fair enough. So when we think about the design thinking and the value that it plays, and I talked about being able to explore alternatives, being able to recognize the right problem, and how that helps you get to the right solution. Uh, what happens if you look at this diamond here? What you're seeing is that this is, we're diverging and we're converging here. So there's a problem that you're trying to solve, and maybe the problem is, I'll give you a personal example. When I was first transitioning out of the Marine Corps, and I was trying to figure out what jobs I wanted to have, or really it was like, how can I pay, because I was a primary breadwinner, and I was transitioned out of the Marine Corps, but I had a wife and we wanted to build a family. And so I had to work, and I had to you know, uh, you know, provide for our family. And so, but the frame I used at the time was more so, okay, what have I done and what can I do? And so I looked at that and I thought, okay, I've done some work in the infantry and intelligence. I've shoot, move, communicate, analysis. Uh, Great. Let me go be a special agent. And so, and I think that's not dissimilar from many other veterans who wind up going into really great professions, law enforcement, and whether it be local or federal. But that was the frame that I used, right? And so that was a problem I thought I was solving. I did not spend time diverging to really explore that problem. I just took a really quick, okay, I converge very quickly. And so through that, I converged. I got a master's in criminal justice, and I'm competitive, and so I wanted to kind of rise up, and so I wanted to get a master's, prepare myself for growth as a special agent. And I applied to DEA, and I was accepted, and started going down that road, and went to get medically screened, and then I realized that I actually had hearing loss in my left ear. And so, because of the hearing loss, I was not actually able to be cleared for training, which was it was probably one of the most difficult things that I dealt with in my life at the time, because so much was built on this convergence track that I was on. What that forced me to do at the time was take a step back and really do what I should have done, which was diverge and say, okay, here's what I've done in my life. I've done these things. What do I want to do? What am I passionate about? What do I want to learn? Where can I have outsized impact? And so, doing that allowed me to realize that, okay, so presenting, speaking, communicating, selling, strategy, innovation, all these things are things I'm really passionate about. I would not have even explored those things at that point in time. Technology was another area that I was super passionate about. And so now I spent time diverging. I spent time reading books. I spent time like exploring, getting more data points, talking to mentors, and talking to more folks. And so that's when it allowed me to say, okay, like let me, corporate is actually a space that I think I will have more space to explore. And let me not get sucked into an exact thing, but let me spend time experimenting. And so as I moved towards the solution of trying to figure out my career, I had some principles now. I had some values of what I wanted to do. And I spent some time experimenting. I did, business process reengineering, sales, operations, product design. And then I said, okay, I'm experimenting, I'm finding out more information. Let me get an MBA, because I think that's going to help me to figure out how to round everything together. So I'm still leaving space for me to be more exploratory in terms of where I go. And so somehow I call myself an accidental designer, because I've kind of stumbled into this thing. But really, it's because I was that critical moment of when I was, forced to diverge. It gave me the space to explore. And so as we go back to this find the right problem thing, I wasn't really truly embracing the double diamond the way I should have. And once I did, it actually allowed me to have so many more solutions, allowed me to see so many more solutions that were now accessible to me as an individual. And so that's an example of how the double diamond is could be so critical for you in terms of critical moments of forcing yourself to stop, pause, broaden your aperture, diverge, explore, and then converge once you've gotten to a right space, and then do the same thing with solutions. And then the next piece I'm going to share that I think is absolutely critical and important. And I'm looking at time here, so I'm gonna wrap up soon. This went way too quickly. Is the iterative cycle of human-centered design. And I mentioned different parts of this, but it starts with observation, observing something, thinking about being ideas, being generative, being creative, prototyping something super quickly, super lightweight, and testing it. And the faster you do this cycle, especially if you're a startup or even a larger organization, the faster you learn. And so what I share with folks is really the insight here. It's really about learning quickly, failing fast, as folks used to say in IDEO, and not being beholden to thinking that you have to have the right answer, and being honest and humble about the fact that oh, I'm good. I don't have any questions yet. Okay, perfect. I'll keep going then. Thanks, Ikram. But being open and honest about what you know, what you don't know, and being willing to find some ways to really observe and get information you need. Find some ways to create some ideas and prototype and test. I'm gonna find a quick way to make this accessible to all of you. I remember Rent a Runway, is a great example of something, a new startup, and maybe not a startup anymore, but an organization that did just this, and they sketched out some things, note back of the pad, to kind of create like, hey, how could this work? And then it's starting super lightweight with like, hey, put up a shell website up and have some people put some orders in, and sending it out like from their by themselves, and then eventually scaling it. Once you know how things work a lot more, you scale, and then you invest a bit more. But it's starting small, and then iterating and learning through that. Okay, I'm going to go to what design needs now, to help us kind of like close this out a little bit. So in my time, and I've been around design since 2015, and I've been in design, for the better portion of maybe close to 5 years now, in terms of just whether it be in the product, and you're playing closely, or maybe actually 6 or 7 years at this point. I got to stop counting, because when you start counting, you realize how old you're getting. And though I don't mind getting old, just like when it's just like, oh, like you always miss a few years for some reason. It's like, that was actually, it's 5 years more than what I thought. And so it's actually super interesting. But so as I think about what design needs, and in the first story that comes to mind is a story of Barry Gordy and Motown. And it's all about process. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the story of Barry Gordy of Motown. Um, I'm still 28. Hello. And so, but with Barry Gordy, Motown was responsible for so many hit makers. So the Supreme, Jackson Five, Isley Brothers, The Temptations, Stevie Wonder. And so, since I got folks who are 23 and 28, these were artists from the 60s and 70s, right? So I'm hoping I have some folks who are familiar with them. But their impression is long lasting in our culture. And so what's really interesting about that is it's not so much the individual artists who's remarkable, but it's the process that Barry Gordy took from the Ford assembly plant, that he used as a quality control mechanism to ensure that they can produce the best work possible. And so, as I think about design, there's an appreciation for process that's so important, so critical, that I, in my opinion, think design needs to move towards, and really appreciate that. There's been, a lot of times with creative fields, you want to have the ability to do things and whatnot, and have the freedom. Freedom is important, but process is equally as important as creativity, and especially when it comes to risk, and when you're risking, whether it be hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, et cetera, there has to be some quality control there. Team leadership. This is hard to teach if you haven't experienced it on a team. So, and innovation is absolutely a team sport. Regardless of whether if you're, a 2 or 3 person team, at some point you're going to want to, brawn that team, right? Or if you're working in a large organization, you have a bunch of stakeholders of folks you have to work through, and you really have to work as a team to get the innovation through the organization. So innovation is a team sport, and team leadership is something that I think is really critical for our future and for design. Next is grit. The ability to get bruised, keep going, and be okay with it, right? So to move from failure to failure without any lack of enthusiasm. I think As I look at design now and where we are and the complexities, the challenges that we have to really jump into, it's going to take a grittier version of design, and I'm optimistic that we'll get there. And I'm hopeful that with more diverse folks coming into design and more experiences, we'll be able to leverage more of that. Outcomes focused. Again, you know, it's about how the product or experience functions. It's about how easy to use it is, about how intuitive it is. It's not about necessarily how beautiful it is, unless that beauty is part of the actual requirement. And so, and if I'm Maserati, what I'm designing is different than if I'm Toyota, right? And so recognizing that the interplay of that is very specific to the customer and the space that you're actually designing for. Now, these are all things that I think you know, come fairly natural to our community, as in our veteran community. I think, we understand the power of training and process and to deliver real lasting change, how that works. I know we have, regardless of military organization, there's always a strong emphasis on training and process. We have our own rivalries and we have fun and we make jokes, but all know that, hey, training is critical, process is critical. Leadership has been ingrained in, I think, in our DNA. We were taught to survive as a team, and that's really important as we think about the challenges that we're and the things that we're designing for now. As you think about progressive corporations, understanding of stakeholders, right? Yes, shareholders are absolutely critical, important, and your stakeholders are important. And if you don't satisfy your stakeholders, then you will not be able to create value for your shareholders, right? And so your customers are your stakeholders. The people that are living near your businesses or near where you're producing are your stakeholders. Your employees are your stakeholders. The regulating bodies are your stakeholders. And so there's a more complex view of value creation that is really important to understand as we think about leadership, team leadership, and being able to maneuver through that as a team. Grit. At varying levels, we've all pushed ourselves past our comfort zones. We know what it's like to be tired, to be wet, to whatever it is, and decide to push us a little bit more. It's a little bit more. And we've gained appreciation for real hard work and failure along the way. That grit, that tenacity is something that I think is a really strong value add within design thinking. And I think it really will help design to kind of broaden and grow as we have been, which I'm really excited about. Outcomes focused. Mission accomplishment was our jobs, right? This is how we think. It's ingrained within us. And this, I think, makes it very easy for us to maintain alignment to the end goal. Like, hey, what's the mission here? What's the goal? What are we driving towards? And being able to ruthlessly prioritize towards that, because there's so many squirrels in the world and so many things that could distract you or point you in a different direction. But being able to maintain focus, maintain alignment is actually super critical for design. It's something I think design need moving forward. So I'm gonna wrap up. I don't know if where we are questions here yet, but I'm gonna in closing, I'd say as I think about the future of design and building a more there's resilience and there's a notion of anti-fragility, which I tend to lean towards. I think for us to get there, we need to broaden the access of design thinking, and I think I'm grateful for sessions like this. And organizations like Vets in Tech that are allowing us to provide more information to help people understand and see themselves within that space. And that's one. Then two, I think the resilience of our systems need design to evolve, right? And to handle that complexity a bit more. And I'm confident that our community is uniquely positioned to support that evolution. I'm hopeful that well, one, I'm grateful that we have some folks already in design, and I see that within chat, and I'm hopeful that we'll have more folks to join to help us to help move the organization and our impact on the world forward. So on that, I want to thank you all for sharing this time with me. I do hope that this was of value to you, and please don't hesitate to connect with me on LinkedIn if I can be helpful to any of you in any capacity. I've certainly been helped by many folks along the way. I would not be here if I wasn't, and I'm happy to do that for any of you. So thank you. I'll pass it back over to Ikram.
Thank you so much, Dwayne. I always love and enjoy hearing you speak. Um, and I have questions of my own, like that could probably last forever. We do have a few in the Q&A, so if others are interested, please feel free to add your questions. We'll have a bit more time. We're a little bit flexible in terms of this discussion. So from Sean, he's asking, where did you find your mentor? And was it someone who you had shared values with, or was he someone who was outside your circle of comfort?
Yeah, great question, Sean. The mentor being Jack Kane, who I referenced back then, right? So that was 2015, and so that was I was living in New York City at the time, and I went online, and I knew that I was passionate about Agile. Didn't really have a background in Agile, and so I joined the New York City Scrum user group, and so I started getting sessions there because they had informal informational sessions where you kind of get newbies like me at the time and more seasoned folks to kind of talk and chat and connect. And so I did that. And so one of the things that they had within the New York City Scrum user group was a mentorship circle. And I said, amazing, great, raise my hand to join. And then I joined Jack's circle. It was actually a funny story because you request to join. And then Jack reached out to me and said, hey, are you sure you want to join this? Because he looked at my resume. He's like, hey, like, your LinkedIn doesn't look like someone that is super technical or should be joining a agile a Scrum mentorship circus. No, that's exactly why I want to join, and so that's why we joined. And absolute shared values. I think Jack was an Army veteran, and just a great human being. Super passionate about team leadership and helping others. Always available, and so yes, so that's why I found Jack, and since then what I've done is I've gained a series of other mentors, and I try to align a mentor with each of my kind of strategic areas of focus that I have, and so I have mentors in different areas. So I happy to chat mentorship for folks as well, for folks who are curious about that.
Awesome. And our second question from Jason, he's curious to know what metrics or decision factors you use when prototyping or iterative designing that tell you when a product won't fit.
It's a great question. So I'll say it depends. I think it depends on the product, depends on the context, depends on the stakeholders. I think there has to be, and depends on the thresholds that you set, right? And so what I mean by that, and so I don't, okay. What I mean by that, meaning that for the product, there's likely going to be some organizational body, whether it be a startup where it's a small group or a large organization where you have a bunch of like steering committees and stakeholders. There's a bunch of folks that are going to care about that product and what that penetration needs to be to get market fit, right? And so regardless of whatever number you come up with for the metrics you're using, whether it be if it's a software product and you're looking at awareness or engagement by critical user flows or critical areas that are being engaged, where you're looking at bounce rates, or there's a bunch of metrics out there. I think what's most important is that you have an understanding and alignment within the organization, within a group. Hey, this is a metric and this is a threshold for success of what this metric is going to be, right? And so if you're super low fidelity, it might be a more scrappy version of that. As in, if low fidelity being you're sketching, back of a napkin kind of thing, and you're not building out code on the site. So I'd say it depends, but what's most important is that you understand the core experience, the value driver that you want to create. And then based on that value driver that you're creating, you then back into the metric from that core value driver, right? And so I can't tell you a specific metric because it depends on your context. And when you know what the core experience you're driving towards, then it's important for you to align on what the threshold of success is so that you can all agree we're going to move forward in this direction.
I have another, great question as well. What do you think is the future of design? And this is from Brooke.
What do I think is the future of design? Wow, that's an interesting question. And I've been thinking about that a lot because you hear a lot of folks looking at AI and Chat GPT and technology, and I think a lot of folks, there might be some worry that's out there right now in the world in terms of, hey, this AI software just quickly created this presentation that would have taken a designer you insert number of hours or days or whatever, depending on level of skill. And you know, and while I'm not discounting the known bias and challenges inherent within algorithms and those things that we are all working through as society, I will say that I remain extremely bullish on technology and human beings, in this case, technology and design, and our ability to collaborate to be more impactful and more effective, right? And so for me, what that means, I think about design, is that we need to move past this place of scarcity and fear of this AI tool create a presentation, because quite frankly, many designers probably don't want to spend their time making a deck, right? And so that's like, hey, find the use cases where you can absolutely leverage AI to help you move faster, to help you, whether it be a design sprint, whatever the case might be, so that we as human beings can move towards a more complex work, the more strategic work. And I think that relationship, and I think you'll find Don Norman in Design of Everyday Things, which I recommend reading, he would recommend a very similar approach, right? Humans and technology is a collaboration game, and we need to find the ways where we can collaborate better, and to leverage our wisdom as human beings with the things, the reliability, the accuracy that technology has that we really can't replicate, right? And so that's the future I see, and I'm excited about it.
Amazing. We have room for like one more question. Clearly the session is should have ended. However, I think this is like an amazing, and sorry, Dwayne, to keep you longer than you intended.
It is all good to be here.
Right. And I'm not sure, Walter Wu, like your question continues to just be AA. So I'm not sure if you're doing that on purpose. If that is that airborne all the way, I'll take it. But I do have a question for Dwayne in terms of design thinking. When I was introduced to design thinking, actually, it was during my time at my master's degree. And Dr. McPherson, who at the time worked at IDEO, she's like one of my favorite human beings. And we were intro to a number of tools, design thinking tools. Would you say, what would you say is your favorite, or like one of the tools that you probably use on a daily basis?
It's a great question. And I have two answers. I have a very basic answer, which is my just listening. I'm a huge just fundamentalist, and so just being like just pausing and really listening is probably one of the most I don't know, powerful tools out there. Just really present there. Beyond that, I would say 2x2s are just so powerful. Like a 2x2, because it just gives you a really structured way to kind of push your thinking along two axes, right? And so it's a very, seemingly can be a very basic tool. I'm a fundamentalist. I love the fundamentals. Like, so you could apply 2x2. You could insert, whatever the axes are, adjust it, and now it gives you, 4 different frames to explore and whatnot. So there are a bunch of tools out there, but I'm a fundamentalist. I think it all depends on the specific challenge that you're exploring.
Yeah.
And then I leave it up to teams to figure out specifically which frames they need to use to navigate.
I think one of my favorite is really like this one question that I think I use multiple times a day, and that is, what is the simplest way of doing this? You know, I use it in the kitchen, in
Yeah,
cleaning, in my job,
yeah.
and so. Joanne, thank you so much. We really do look forward to working with you. And again, for all of our audience, in terms of like this session being in the entrepreneurship, it is really essential. It's a basic need to really launch your idea, to pivot, to do it fast, and grow out scale. So with that, Joanne, I thank you very much, and we'll stay in touch. And we have basic law after this, so go mingle, and then I'll see you in a few.
Amazing. Thank you, Ikram. Thank you all. I've greatly enjoyed my time with you all. So thank you very much.